Hey, what's up guys? Tougie here, back again, and as if the amount of tabs don't already tell you this, we have a lot to talk about today. The NHL Awards are tonight. We also have the Kevin Hayes signing that I want to talk about, and a couple of other trades. So let's get right down to business. Again, the NHL Awards are tonight, highlighted by me from the NHL 20 reveal trailer, which I'm excited to see what they put together. You already went to Vancouver, you've seen the game. I have, but I want to see what they announced so that I can talk about some stuff finally. NDAs are a hell of a thing. Non-disclosure agreement, for those of you who don't know. But let's talk about the actual awards themselves, shall we? Why the hell not? Now, the one award that isn't listed here would be the Mark Messier Leadership Award for excellence and stuff like that, which I will say, I think Connor McDavid's gonna win it. He probably should, for the amount of garbage he had to put up with in Edmonton. That's not to say that other captains weren't amazing leaders. Alex Pietrangelo for helping keep that Blues team together. Zdeno Chara for playing through the Cup final with a fucking broken jaw, basically. There's a lot of good nominees you could have. I think Connor McDavid has to take it because, my God, imagine keeping on a brave face for the majority of that season. But we get to the first award. It is the Frank J. Selke Award. You know what? Bam! Let's zoom in a little bit. Look at that. That looks a hell of a lot better, doesn't it? Maybe, probably. I don't know. Ryan O'Reilly, Patrice Bergeron, and Mark Stone. Now, see, here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Now, a lot of people are aware of this lovely, lovely tool, the All Three Zones Player Comparison Tool, which is, it's the new hotness right now because the hero charts haven't existed for a while. But here's the thing, right? Because obviously, with Patrice Bergeron, I'm going to have a little bit of bias. But this year, at least in the games where where he was tracked, it wasn't a shining year for Patrice Bergeron defensively. I love Patrice Bergeron. He is amazing, and I love him to death. Although, no, we don't want Michael Stone. There is a big, big difference between Mark Stone and Michael Stone. Mark Stone is potentially the best defensive player in the league, and I think the reason why I would want him to win is not because Ryan O'Reilly was a member of the St. Louis Blues, but because more often than not, and I'm going to be talking about this a lot with these awards, certain awards always seem to go to the same type of players, and the Selke Award has turned into the best defensive forward who also scores and who is also a center normally. My vote would be for Mark Stone, although I didn't know it was going to close that. I think Mark Stone should win it. Ryan O'Reilly had a pretty goddamn good year. He already got the award that he cares about, and we'll be talking about the Blues a little bit later. But my vote, not just for the numbers that you see here, but I mean, Mark Stone is perhaps, in terms of his defensive game, people obviously view him as, a big point guy. That's the reason why he got the contract with Vegas that he did. He's also one of the best defensive players in the league, period. I think Mark Stone should win it. He has my vote. The Lady Byng is one that, as a fan, can you really vote on it? The player who exemplifies the best type of sportsmanship and gentlemanly conduct combined with the high standard of playing ability. That, as a fan, you can't really vote on that. I'm sure all of these men are lovely gentlemen, and they all do certainly play with the high level of ability. So for me, just to make sure that Sasha Barkov gets an award, I'd vote for him, because he should be on the Selke nomination over Patrice Bergeron. It's just a fact. So I'm hoping Sasha Barkov takes home the Lady Byng. The Masterton, which again is kind of a weird one as a fan to be like, this guy has the best sportsmanship and dedication. It's Robin Lehner. It is. Not saying Joe Thornton isn't dedicated to hockey. He wants to play 5 more years, apparently. He might play till he's 50. I love Joe Thornton, despite the fact he hasn't been on my team for a long goddamn time. And Nick Foligno, can't overlook Nick Foligno, but it's Robin Lehner. His story, the turnaround, just, I'll say, himself getting better as a person, we'll say, and what the Islanders accomplished this year. Robin Lehner definitely has my vote for the Masterton. The Vezina. Now, here's why Elite Prospects is open. Here's why we have a lot of different options open here, because we're going to be bouncing around. There's going to be a lot of stats to look at. There's going to be a decent amount to talk about, and hopefully EP decides to load relatively quickly. I thought that would have loaded up differently, but then we have good old Andrei Vasilevsky, and, of course, Robin Lehner. Now, again, for me, Robin Lehner gets the Masterton, gets the award he probably deserves. We look at Ben Bishop's numbers this year. He had a .934 save percentage in 46 games. Andrei Vasilevsky, a .925. And then Robin Lehner had a .930 in 46 games. It's not even a discussion. It's not. Ben Bishop was the best goaltender in the regular season this year. He should be winning the Vezina, period. Especially, too, judged to be the best at his position. You want to talk about puck movement. I mean, in terms of puck movement and arguably flopping ability, Ben Bishop is the most complete goaltender in the league for the 2018-19 season. And again, it's just not close. It isn't. And my fear is that it's going to go to Andrei Vasilevsky because of what Tampa accomplished this year. And sure, he played 7 more games, but just no. That is Ben Bishop's trophy, and they're going to take it away from him. It's going to go to Leonard Vasilevsky again. I think Leonard gets his award with the Masterton. That's who I think should win and who I want to win. The Lady Byng, I think it'll probably go to O'Reilly, but of course I want Barkov. And then the Selke, I think it'll go to O'Reilly, but I want it to be Mark Stone. The Vezina, to me, it's and again, I try not to care too much about the NHL awards because whatever. Ben Bishop was the best goalie this year in the regular season. Period. The Norris, which, again, talking about awards, and we all know this, the Norris has obviously become the highest scoring defenseman award, and it has been that way for a long time. I'm not sure if I'm on board with we should have, like the Bobby Orr award for the highest scoring defenseman and then the Norris. Not sure if I'm on board with that. It wouldn't be the worst idea. But Burns, Giordano, and Victor Hedman. And again, in terms of point totals, and fuck it, we'll take a look here. The good thing is I can just go to defense because they'll be up there. Shout out, of course, to Morgan Riley, who was arguably jobbed. John Carlson was also up there for scoring. And then, of course, shockingly, Victor Hedman, not one of the ones who led the way in terms of point totals. But Brent Burns this year, I mean, over a point a game as a defenseman, he held up his end of the bargain and the Sharks' run to the Western Conference Final. Mark Giordano, 74 points in 78 games is nothing to scoff at, but obviously a rough end of the season. Of course, the awards are voted on before the postseason begins for good reason. And then Victor Hedman. I mean, if you want to talk about the most valuable defenseman to his team, it's arguably Victor Hedman. Only plays in 2 out of the 4 games that the Lightning had in the first round. He was clearly injured for both of those games. You see how the Lightning fell apart, not discrediting Columbus, but you see how the Lightning fell apart without Victor Hedman. It's fairly ridiculous. And if you want to take a look, of course, there are other things to look at, other stats. You can look at fucking Corsi, Fenwick, whatever the hell else you want. But just for a basic tool here. I mean, based off of well-roundedness, it's tough to say. I mean, again, you look at these charts, Gio gets the nod, I would say. I think it's kind of surprising. Some of the numbers here, mainly in terms of the entry defense for Hedman, you would have thought he would have been a little bit better. But then you have Brent Burns, who lives up to what Brent Burns is. Brent Burns gets my vote. I know a lot of people are saying Mark Giordano, and I totally understand it for what he accomplished at 35, going on 36 years old by the start of the next season. It was a great season for him and for the Flames. But if you look at those 3 and you talk about, point totals, you talk about, again, the best all-around ability, Brent Burns, I mean, again, this is only one metric. I'm not saying this is the end-all, be-all, right? But Brent Burns was up there. And you can argue, again, that someone like Morgan Riley unfortunately got jobbed a little bit. And for the hell of it, John Carlson also had, again, a great season. But out of the 3, it goes to Brent Burns for me. No doubt about it. The King Clancy, which, again, is another one where it's like, as an individual, as just a fan, how could I possibly vote on that? Oliver Lawson Tossum, as Don Cherry once called him. That's true, by the way, as those of you who have been watching the streams over the past few nights are aware. Ekman Larson, Lundqvist, and Zucker. Henrik Lundqvist, because he has amazing hair. The Messier is here. and it's down to Gio, Simmons, and Williams. I did not see that. And that's bullshit that Connor McDavid isn't there. Are you serious? Now, I know it's not down to just being a captain, obviously, although 2 out of 3 are. How the... Wow, I can't believe I missed it, and McDavid isn't there. Justin Williams, out of those 3, although, if you're upset about Mark Giordano not winning the Norris, give it to Gio here. But probably Justin Williams for what they did in Carolina this year. He has my vote at least. I think Gio will win it. The Jack Adams, also known as the Most Improved Team Award, outside, of course, of John Cooper. Bottom line is, and you know what? This is actually a tough one because people will debate. Contributed the most to his team's success. You want to say John Cooper because the Lightning tied the wins record this year. But people would debate just how successful the Lightning would have been without John Cooper because of what happened in the playoffs, which, that's the way it works for coaching. Oh, the team's good. Oh, they could have been good without you. Oh, the team lost in 4 games in the first round. It's all John Cooper's fault. You see how that works. But I don't think the Jack Adams, it's tough. Is it going to be directly contributed to the most wins or to what team improved the most? Because overall, the New York Islanders improved the most. You want to talk about getting the most out of the very little? Barry Trotz did that with the Islanders. Tampa was expected to be great, and sure, they exceeded expectations because they were amazing, record-tying, in the regular season at least. And with Greg Berube, you already got your trophy. It is an amazing turnaround, but the Blues shouldn't have been as bad as they were. Everybody knows that. You look at the core that was already there, and again, we'll be talking about more of this with the Blues, actually, when we talk about the Kevin Hayes trade. But you look at Berube and the Blues, or, the team that he inherited, they weren't supposed to be that bad. The core that was already intact, the addition of Ryan O'Reilly, he really he did help turn a struggling team around, but it's tough to say, too, because you don't want to directly contribute the Blues turnaround to Jordan Binnington. Berube certainly had a big part to do with that. But if we're judging it just off of the regular season, or really even before the Cup was awarded, if I don't say the Blues, I'm a salty Bruins fan. But I'd go Barry Trotz. Am I wrong in saying that? And I don't think Berube is going to care. Oh, what? I didn't get the Jack Adams? Oh, let me take another swig out of the Stanley Cup. Let me keep eating this bowl of cereal out of the Stanley Cup. He doesn't give a fuck. He's a champion. Barry Trotz, with that Islanders team, the Islanders team that lost John Tavares, inherited the goaltender that Buffalo didn't want, essentially, and they made the playoffs, made it out of the first round by sweeping Pittsburgh. I give it to Barry Trotz. But it's so tough because I could see any of the 3 winning it. And again, I guess if you don't give this, are you discrediting John? If you don't give it to John Cooper, are you discrediting John Cooper by saying that team would have been good without you? If you don't give it to Craig Berube, are you discrediting the fact that they went on to win the Cup? But then you look at the turnaround for Trotz and the fact, again, that they lost John Tavares and what that team became, mainly because of the defensive structure that he implemented and the revitalized Robin Lehner. I personally think, in terms of contributed the most to his team's success, I think it has to be Berube or Trotz. I'd rather see it go to Trotz because, again, Berube already has his award. But, if it goes to Craig Berube, I'm not like, oh my God, what an outrage. That's a really tough one to pick, is the point. The Calder. Talk about tough ones to pick. God damn. And already looking at Binnington there just makes me think, Jack Adams, I go with Berube. Trotz, runner-up. But I think Berube is going to win. I'd prefer to see Trotz win because he deserves some recognition. Not just you were top 3 recognition, because he did an amazing job with that team. Oh my God, how? There are going to be some upset fans. There are already upset fans that Miro Heiskanen wasn't a part of this final three, but how can you not say that the three that are there don't deserve to be there? Jordan Binnington arguably got robbed of the Conn Smythe. And what he did, the Blues story, we've talked about it. It's unreal. I mean, granted, a 9-14 in the postseason isn't that great. It's good enough to win a Stanley Cup. But the 9-27 in 32 games, of course, being a part of the Blues turnaround. Pettersson, 66 points in 71 games on a non-playoff team is outrageous. And then Rasmus Dahlin, 44 points, but that doesn't tell the full story with what Rasmus Dahlin did this year. You look at those numbers. Compared to Brent Burns, who should win the Norris, Rasmus Dahlin is the real fucking deal. He really is. And that's not to discount Elias Pettersson. Not at all. I mean, again, in terms of puck possession, obviously for forwards, it doesn't track entry defense, but for puck possession, he is an absolute monster. I personally give it to Rasmus Dahlin, but how can you not give it to Jordan Binnington? And earlier on in the season, it looked like Pettersson for sure, and it might still be Pettersson for the points, but Rasmus Dahlin played like a number one defenseman as a rookie on a non-playoff team. Jordan Binnington helped turn the Blues season around en route to a Stanley Cup. So again, I think it's so tough to deny Berube, in favor of Trotz. I think that's what arguably could be done, but, this was also based off of regular season, right? So if we base this solely off of regular season, what's more impressive? Berube's turnaround for the Blues that we know ultimately led to a cup, or Barry Trotz doing what he did with the Islanders? I kind of lean towards Trotz because the Blues never should have been that bad. Same thing with the Calder, though. Jordan Binnington was on a really fucking good run, but again, Rasmus Dahlin was a number one. I give it to Dahlin. Jordan Binnington is my guess as to who wins it because of what happened. But then again, these were voted on before the postseason began. So maybe Pettersson wins it. I don't know. But I got to go with my heart on these. I think Trotz wins it. Had everyone known that the Blues were going to go on to win the Cup, sure. But you look at the definition, too, for any of those are just so tough. I could see both Blues personnel winning it, though. But I think Trotz and Dahlin. The heart, which, again, is outrageous. I mean, it's Connor McDavid. For a second, I'm like, oh, that's right. Was he even voted in on this? He was. Connor McDavid wins the heart. Period. End of story. Connor McDavid is the player most valuable to his team. The Edmonton Oilers, without Connor McDavid, nothing. Like, they are so bad. And the fact that, and again, maybe they should change up the way the awards go, but Connor McDavid has my vote every day of the week. And again, that's not good. If you look at, the setup here, I mean, obviously, what Nikita Kucherov did this season, there we go, 128 points in 82 games is fucking absurd, obviously. It's tough to deny that somebody that dominant shouldn't be the Hart winner. And then you have Connor McDavid, who technically Kucherov was, Kucherov was slightly better than this season. I mean, Sidney Crosby, not to overlook Sidney Crosby, but, and granted, they only tracked him for 15 games. But, Crosby had a great year. Pittsburgh, probably not sniffing the playoffs if Crosby doesn't have the season that he did. And obviously, for the Penguins, you have a lot more questions than just, Sidney Crosby firing on all cylinders. But, and of course, it's not just based off of point totals. You have a lot of people upset that Patrick Kane isn't there. I mean, it comes down to Kucherov and McDavid. But most valuable to his team. Would the Tampa Bay Lightning have been a playoff team without Nikita Kucherov? Maybe. Connor McDavid is the most valuable to his team. The better player this season, in terms of numbers, the points, was Nikita Kucherov. But by definition, the most valuable to his team is Connor McDavid. Nikita Kucherov had a better season, but the most valuable to his team is Connor McDavid. No doubt in my mind. So that goes to Kucherov. I think Kucherov will win it as well for the season that he had. Would have said Connor McDavid before, no. I think McDavid should win. Kucherov will. But based off the definition, McDavid should probably win that. The Ted Lindsay Award. League's Outstanding Player, Connor McDavid. Although, actually, no, wait, inverse those. It's late, I'm sorry. Hart Trophy, McDavid. Ted Lindsay Award, Nikita Kucherov. For the reasons that we talked about. And the GM of the Year. Doug Armstrong. It's Doug Armstrong. This normally does go to and again, people have talked about it, it's a Steve Dangle quote at this point, the Stanley Cup is the GM of the Year award. Doug Armstrong added the player that the Blues desperately needed. You look at how they've drafted, but then you add Ryan O'Reilly to that Blues team, and there you go. You get that end result. Don Sweeney had a great year, bringing in Yaroslav Halak, the deadline acquisitions of Charlie Coyle and Marcus Johansson, and the Bruins don't make it out of the first round without the addition of those two. And Dom Waddell, as well, deserves all the credit in the world for what the Hurricanes did this year. But I think on the likelihood to win it, they're in the correct order. 1, 2, 3. Doug Armstrong is the GM of the year. It's that Ryan O'Reilly move that put the team over the edge. With this being voted on before the playoffs begin, maybe Don Sweeney gets it. Maybe even Dom Waddell gets it. But I think just everybody knew, at the end of the year, the Ryan O'Reilly, or, heading into this year, and then by the end of the year where the Blues make the playoffs, you're like, man, they're on fire. Ryan O'Reilly was that addition they needed. Those are my votes for the NHL Awards. So again, Armstrong wins, and he should. Nikita Kucherov wins, and he should. Connor McDavid should win, but I think Kucherov might win that too. The Calder goes to Dahlin. Could see it going to anybody else, but I truly think it should be Rasmus Dahlin. The Jack Adams, just give it to Trotz, but it might go to Berube. Or John Cooper for winning. Like I said, it's a tough one. Leadership Award, probably Justin Williams. The Clancy, again, give it to Lundqvist for the hell of it. The Norris is Brent Burns, no doubt. The Vezina is Ben Bishop, no doubt. The Masterton, Robin Leonard. The Lady Bing, give it to Sasha Markov. The Selke to Mark Stone. Those are my votes for the awards. Again, those are tonight. We shall see. Now, I want to move on to talking about the deal that has just destroyed hockey Twitter and the hockey world in general. Kevin Hayes signing for 7 years at $7.142 million. This deal has broken the internet. A deal that is comparable to what Ryan O'Reilly, Travis Zajac at the time in 2013, and Brock Nelson, the deal that he just got, happens to be. And I will say this, I don't think it's a bad signing. Is it maybe a little bit too much? Sure. But consider this, if you're a Flyers fan, and obviously we'll get into talking about quite a few different things here. If you're a Flyers fan, your team had 3 options, at least how I see it. Your team had 3 options. Option number 1 is to not sign Kevin Hayes, which probably not a good move. Because if you look at upcoming UFA centers, Kevin Hayes is arguably the second best center available. And if we judge it just based off of, let's go with just points. Let's say 34 points. That'll weed out some people. These are the upcoming UFA and RFA centers, right? And really, there's only 2 UFA centers that put up 34 more points this past season. Joe Thornton and Matt Duchene. Call it a hunch, I don't think the Flyers were going to end up with either of them. Could be wrong on that. We don't know, of course, what Joe Thornton's future is going to be in San Jose. And, of course, they have some cap issues, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. William Karlsson also had some point. What the hell? That was 30 points, right? Yeah, 30 points. Don't know why Karlsson wasn't listed there. That's a weird one. Is that total points? That's not total points. Why wasn't Karlsson listed there? I know he's an RFA, but still. Regardless, you know what, here. This might be weird, or maybe I'm missing something. Let's just look at... It's here somewhere. Where are you? Where are you? Status, not arbitration, contract. There it is. Let's look at just upcoming UFA centers, right? So, if they don't go out and get Kevin Hayes, you're looking at trying to get into the Matt Duchene sweepstakes, which again is unlikely. Your options from there include Jason Spezza, Derek Brassard. Mojo typically doesn't play center. Colin Wilson's been used more as a winger. Of course, Thornton was there. Valtteri Filppula. Maybe Eric Fair interests you at this point. Maybe Mark Letestu. You get the point. Arguably, Kevin Hayes is the second best free agent center this year behind Matt Duchene. So, if the Flyers don't go out and get Kevin Hayes, again, and they don't end up with Matt Duchene, they have a severe problem on their hands. Not one that I'd recommend. So if they don't go out and get Kevin Hayes, and you don't end up with Matt Duchene, then you are stuck with meh. You're stuck with meh. You have Sean Couturier at center, Nolan Patrick there, and then more of the same. It might not be Scott Lawton, Phil Varone, Byron Frazee exactly, but it's probably going to be players of that ilk. Maybe you get a Tyler Ennis. Maybe Mikhail Vorobyev or German Rupsov can take the step up. Maybe. But odds are, who knows, maybe Morgan Frost makes the jump, although you might not want to rush his development, even though he tore the OHL to shreds. Claude Giroux doesn't play center anymore. Travis Konechny doesn't play center. You needed somebody. So if you don't go out and get Kevin Hayes, and you do nothing, you're right where you were last year, which is out of the playoffs, which is a nightmare scenario for you, because right now you are in essentially Giroux, who is 31, and Voracek's primes, which is taking a while to load, who is 29 years old. So, if the Flyers don't get Kevin Hayes and miss out on Matt Duchene, they either get meh, they stay meh, or the other alternative is they blow it the fuck up. And if you're a Flyers fan, what would you prefer? Because I don't know if I'd want to sit there and watch my team continue to be meh, wasting Giroux and Voracek's, wasting more years off of their prime by not being in the playoffs. Now, I'm not saying the Flyers, without Kevin Hayes, won't be in playoff contention, by the time Giroux and Voracek start to regress, but you have gone from being a non-playoff team to having a center core of Couturier, Hayes, and Patrick, and I get it. Oh man, Nolan Patrick could have been the 2C at this point. Maybe, but he is still just 20 years old. There aren't many 20-year-olds that are the 2C on their team, which is why we have all these tabs open from Daily Faceoff, and you look at what all 16 playoff teams had this season at center. So again, right now, Philly, because they signed Kevin Hayes, they are looking at, again, Couturier, Hayes, and Patrick. You look at the Bruins, Bergeron, Krejci, Coyle, pretty goddamn good center depth. You look at Calgary, Monahan, Backlund, Jankowski, pretty goddamn good center depth. You look at Carolina, Aho, Stahl, and Greg McKegg. Not ideal. Not ideal. They have the talent to make up for it on the wings. They have that that highly praised defense core, but you'd kind of be looking at a similar situation if you didn't sign, Hayes. You're dealing with Aho, Stahl, and McKegg. I mean, can you win a cup with that? Carolina made it to within a few wins, but we'll just call it a little bit unlikely, right? Just a little bit unlikely. And again, Sebastian Aho is the youngest guy that we've seen so far, and unfortunately, they don't have his age here. Give me uno momento. How old is Sebastian Aho at this point? That's a really good question. Sebi, how old are you? 21 is my guess. He is 21. So, case in point, I mean, I get it. Nolan Patrick this past year, 31 points. Sebastian Aho at the same age, put up 65. I get it, right? As far as, wishing Nolan Patrick was there. But to continue my point, Colorado, called a one-line team. Soderberg had a pretty good year in terms of goal scoring. Tyson Jost was there. It was surprising to see Carolina go as far as they did. It was surprising to see Colorado make it past Calgary. You look at, obviously, Columbus. Dubois, Duchesne, Jenner is unreal center depth. And obviously, they ran into the third best team in the league, tied with Calgary in points, the Bruins in the second round after getting through Tampa. That's a tough matchup. You look at Dallas. I mean, Sagan, Heinz, and Faxa, the development of Rupe Heinz, I think, caught a lot of people off guard, myself included, to the point where I don't even know if I'm saying his last name right. But, it's Calgary. I keep saying Calgary. Dallas had a good team. But you see the point here. Would I trust that center depth over Couturier, Patrick, whoever? Fuck yeah. Do I trust that center depth over Couturier, Hayes, and Patrick? It's at least more competitive, is it not? You look at what Nashville ran, which granted, they didn't make it out of the first round, but Johansson, Turris, and Sissons is pretty goddamn good. Even Nick Bonino there on the fourth line. Brian Boyle, we know, can play center. Granlund can play center. Again, tough matchup in the first round against Dallas. You look at the Islanders. I mean, Nelson, Barzal, and Filppula, not too bad. But again, if you had to say, Couturier and Patrick versus Nelson and Barzal, I'm giving that to the Islanders. But you end up saying Couturier, Hayes, and Patrick against Nelson, Barzal, Filppula. Again, it's a little bit more of a fight, isn't it? Pittsburgh's center depth obviously speaks for its goddamn self. The Sharks' center depth, not exactly surprising that they made it to the conference final. And the Sharks are actually the team that I really want to bring up here when I mentioned that I'd talk about the St. Louis Blues later on, because we go back to the Flyers. I don't think for Philly it's as simple as, Carter Hart's probably going to be the starter next year, and that's all we needed. And I'm not saying Flyers fans have said that, but I don't think for the Flyers it was, you just need Carter Hart and goaltending and you're good to go. It wasn't that. Whereas with the Blues turnaround this year, obviously you get the new coach and the team finally starts playing well under that new system, and then you get Jordan Binnington in there who gives you that solid goaltending. You're off to the races. I think there's just a little bit of a difference between the St. Louis Blues core and the Flyers core. That is not to say that the Flyers have a bad core, but then again, you look at the Blues where it's, we need that one more piece. They go out and steal Ryan O'Reilly, and then there they go. Again, with Philly, I don't think you were there. Obviously not saying that Kevin Hayes is Ryan O'Reilly. Don't confuse that. But I think you get the point, right? For Philly, this is more than just, we don't need Kevin Hayes. All we needed was good goaltending and we're fine. That is not the case. So, and again, just to wrap up looking at these teams, the center depth for the Blues was great. The center depth for Tampa, pretty goddamn good. Although, of course, Stamkos is playing on the wing by the end of it, which is very weird. You look at the center depth for Toronto. Again, they didn't get out of the first round, but a very, very tough matchup for them with the Bruins. But that is a team's center depth, at least that top three, that you could see winning a Stanley Cup. Same with Vegas. I mean, they made it to the, granted, a little bit of a difference with Stastny being in. But, again, you give me Carlson, Stastny, Eakin against Couturier, Patrick, and meh, I'm going with Vegas. But you give me, again, the Couturier, Hayes, Patrick against those three, we have a little bit more of an argument, don't we? The point is, and again, frickin' Kuznetsov's listed twice, unfortunately. I'm not surprised some of these are a bit out of sorts following moves. But, and again, too, with Winnipeg, I know they lost in the first round, but you get my point. This Hayes deal improves the Flyers significantly. I know it's not great that it's, a shade over 7-1. I get that. But that is, in a way, what certain players command at this point, especially the second best center going to free agency, who was making a little over $5 million per on the last deal. Of course he was going to get this much. And that's just kind of what you have to do, especially, again, if you're facing the pressure that the Flyers are facing to, it's kind of getting to be make or break time with Claude Giroux, with James Van Riemsdyk, with Voracek. You do have the younger guys like Konechny, like Sean Couturier, like Nolan Patrick, Provorov as well. That defense, of course, changed with Braun, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. But they needed to do something. And if I'm a Flyers fan, if you weren't going to blow it up, then I would prefer this over meh, and you don't really do anything. You just make a lateral move, and you go nowhere. Because, again, for me, with how tough the Metro is, you don't just all of a sudden make it if you're the Flyers because Carter Hart goes on a tear. I don't think they had enough. And even without the Hayes deal, if you look at the addition of Niskanen and Braun, I still don't think that would have been enough for them to, for sure, make it. So, if I'm a Flyers fan, I'm happy with the Hayes move at the very least. Now, we'll get talking about the other trades, but I get it if you're nervous that it's like, oh, okay, well, he's playing under Alain Vigneault again, and he didn't do that well under Vigneault before. He's only scored over 20 goals once, only gotten over 50 points, or never gotten 50 points, actually. Well, no, he did this year, the 42 and the 13. Coming off a career year, I get that. But your alternative was a lateral move for 3C at best. Maybe you move Claude Giroux back to center, and if you do, then you have JVR, Lindblom, Raffle, and down the left-hand side, maybe Farabee steps up, although I believe he's already committed to... No, okay, yeah, he's on the team. I mean, maybe Farabee makes it, and that would have been easy, but it's just... I can't help but think, and again, could be wrong here, but it's my opinion, it was the better move to go in for Kevin Hayes, again, who was going to be the second best center. Gave up the 5th round pick to get him. I don't know, man. I don't think it's that bad of a deal. Now, I get what some people are saying, and this was sent around a lot, including by Joe Haggerty, who's a Boston sports writer. But he mentioned, Marchand was getting paid 6.1. You can look at that Brad Marchand contract, and the thing about it is he was coming off of a career year. And yeah, that's a damn good contract for someone who put up the same amount of points as Sidney Crosby this year. But you look at that. It was at the beginning of the 17-18 season. So coming off of that, he had just put up his best point total ever with 85 points. He's also a winger. You also have to factor in, the cap and what these contracts are. They've been going up. Sure, I think ideally you want it to be like, oh yeah, Kevin Hayes for $6 million, but $1 million more isn't an overpayment. You want to look at an overpayment? I'll fucking show you an overpayment. The David Krejci contract, who at the time was getting paid like a number 1 center, despite being the number 2 center. He signed this deal at the end of the 2014 season, so heading into 15-16, that deal started. And, 31 points in 47 games, 69 points, 73 points in 08-09. Again, I know Krejci has had a little bit of a better history, but to my point, it's not a bad deal. It's gonna be okay, probably. I get it. New GM, making moves, wheeling and dealing here. There's obviously the Justin Braun trade, and I get that. Giving up a 2nd and a 3rd rounder is kind of scary. But, if you look at Braun, and, damn it, it was timed out, essentially. If you look at Braun, too, I saw someone quote plus minus and facepalmed legitimately. He's fine. He's fine. I know they're not Brent Burns-like numbers, but Braun is a fine defenseman. Is a 2nd and a 3rd maybe a little bit much, potentially. But you factor in now, and then again, too, if you want to compare, say, Niskanen and Gudas, you can look at certain stats like Corsi or whatever, and it's a little bit more evened out between Gudas and Niskanen. But then you get into, this past year's numbers, and in terms of a shutdown defenseman, and just, zone exits. I mean, from an offensive standpoint, Niskanen's, offensive levels have absolutely dropped compared to what they once were. And, I mean, you can look here, too. I mean, the 30-point guy, he still had 25 points last year, but his offensive effectiveness has dropped, but he's still a shutdown defenseman. The Flyers have improved the team by giving up Radko Gudas and retaining a little bit of salary, but that is what it is. By giving up Radko Gudas, a second, a third, and a fifth to get Niskanen, Braun, and Kevin Hayes. To me, again, if I'm a Flyers fan, that is a hell of a lot better than just sitting around and hoping that prospects can make the jump. Is it enough to get them into cup contention? I don't know. And yeah, a lot of that really does depend on what happens with Carter Hart, and I think who the backup is heading into next year, because all three, Talbot, Elliott, and Neuwirth, are up, and obviously Flyers fans are waving Neuwirth goodbye, but, whether or not Brian Elliott comes back or somebody else, time will tell. But, again, just I don't view this as this massive lol Flyers, you overpaid so heavily type of move. I don't see it like that. They still have money. Of course, you do have to re-sign Konechny. Probably want to re-sign Hartman after giving up a first-round pick, too. And Provorov has to sign. But there's no way nearly $22.9 million is going to be like, okay, that's it. We got Hartman, Konechny, and Provorov, and we're done. They're still going to have some money to play with despite this deal. So, again, I don't view it as such a ridiculous negative. And that help will probably come in the form of a wing, you would think. And if you think about who some of the, and here we'll take a look at some of the UFA wingers are in this upcoming free agency period as of July 1st. Can I sort it by just left wing and right wing or not? Apparently not. But let's just go left wings first, right? Artemi Panarin, maybe not. Call it a hunch. Don't think that'll happen. Anders Lee, probably won't happen. But could Philly be in for a Ryan Dzingel type? Sure, that would help the team. Don't know if you're going to want to hand Michael Ferland the amount of money he is apparently looking for. But there are a couple of guys out there that can at least shore things up or help improve the team on the left wing after Dzingel was looking a little bit shaky, I'll admit. And on the right-hand side, I mean, Nyquist, Zuccarello, maybe not. Fuck it. Maybe they bring back Wayne Simmons because his price just dropped because he did not have a very fun experience with Nashville. There are guys out there that Philly will still be able to go after despite this trade. So I'm going to stop ranting and rambling on that point. I don't hate it. The end. I don't hate it. And to the point with the other Flyers deals, again, the Niskanen deal, I don't totally hate it. Yeah, it kind of helps out Washington from a cap sense. But if you look at Washington, you get it from a cap sense. If you look at Washington, I mean, they did just re-sign Carl Hagelin, but they only have $10.7 million available. They have some people that they're probably going to want to lock up. Christian Djoos on defense, for example. So while it's going to help them, retain some of the players they already have, it's not as if Washington, and fuck it, about time they do, it's not as if you just opened up the room for Washington to go out and get Artemi Panarin. Sure, you let him off the hook a little bit. The biggest sacrifice is going to be them maybe losing Brett Connolly, who, in fairness, had a pretty damn good year this year. He had 46 points, which is a career high, which, why couldn't you have done that when you were in Boston? But, if the biggest sacrifice is that you lose Brett Connolly, who I imagine his shooting percentage was pretty goddamn high this year. I mean, really, Philly, did you help him out that much? At least not in the interim. And again, for the Justin Braun trade, a second and a third for a decent fourth liner. I mean, again, it's a third-round pick next year, 41st overall this year. Again, slightly high there, slightly high on what you paid Hayes. I don't get why some people are losing their goddamn mind. Now, if you are the New York Rangers, I get why you're losing your mind because you are overjoyed. Whereas Jets fans, oof, I mean, put it this way: you knew something was going to happen because of Trouba, Line, and Kyle Connor. I don't think you imagined it to be this bad. Now, in terms of Trouba, everyone knew he wasn't going to stay. Like, that relationship was damaged, right? But there were times, obviously, where the value for him was a little bit higher. And admittedly, and if here, I don't feel like that 1 year is a very good reflection of Trouba. Although, in fairness, the defense gets worse, but you see the possession numbers go up. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. I don't blame the Jets for keeping Trouba and saying, let's go for it, right? I don't blame them at all. But you knew that there was going to be a sacrifice here. He's ultimately the sacrifice. You knew the value was going to be down because, yes, while he's an RFA, people kind of know he doesn't want to stay there. However, while the first-round pick is nice, and while Neil Pionk isn't the worst defenseman in the world in a general term, his ability in the defensive zone, not good at all. He can put up points. He's not bad with the puck. And to be honest, I asked Rangers fans, like, really, why do people hate him so much? And then I found out why. I equate him to TJ Brennan. And a lot of people might not know who the hell TJ Brennan is. And that is fine. Funny enough, he's in the Flyers organization, former Portland Pirate. TJ Brennan has been arguably consistently the best offensive defenseman in the AHL for half a decade now, at least. He rips that league to shreds. To shreds, I say. 60 points, 68 points, 72 points with the Marlies back in 13-14. The problem is he can't play defense. And it makes me wonder why he hasn't converted to being a winger at this point, because his offensive touch is tremendous. But even back in 2013, they knew needs to improve defensive game, and it just never happened. And perhaps Neil Pionk is cut from the same cloth because, yeah, those numbers are pretty bad. So, you know, if you're a Jets fan, like, I get it. Like, really, we got one first-round pick and an offensive defenseman who can't do anything. I understand the frustrations, but in a way, this is what happens when your team goes for it and you lose. And maybe I'm just more comfortable with it because as a Bruins fan again, and I know the Bruins fan bringing up 2011, but to my point, 2011 happens, awesome. 2013 happens, I'm like, you know what, fuck it, yeah, go for it. The Bruins lose in 6 to Chicago and suffered immediate consequences because of it. And we're talking, you know, either early exits, missing the playoffs on the last day of the season. It was bad there, and they did well, despite the 3 straight picks to rebuild out of that. And of course, make it to the Cup final this year. If you're the Jets, yeah, it kind of sucks. Kind of sucks to, have given up a first. You get it back, after the Kevin Hayes deal, and you lose Trouba for, a somewhat lopsided deal. I mean, obviously, again, these numbers aren't everything, but Trouba's the better defenseman now. He's a top 4 defenseman, and Pionk needs some work. The good thing about Neil Pionk, though he's still a younger guy, but, for the Jets, something had to give. You got $25 million in space. You still have to sign Line. You still have to sign Connor. And, now that you don't need to sign Trouba, you can still kind of keep this team together. Their cup window is still open. Obviously, Wheeler, Scheifele, Eller's still locked up. Brian Little as well. You're still in a good spot. But when you go for it and you miss, there has to be consequences. The real shitty thing for you guys, of course, is that you lost in the first round, which it happens, man. That's the only thing you can say. It happens. It happened to Tampa. It happened to Toronto. It happened to Calgary. There were really good teams that fell in the first round. It's the playoffs. That's just how it works. So, it's a win for the Rangers, and obviously what the Rangers have there, and what they're doing, I still don't think the Rangers are like, oh yeah, fucking, contention, playoffs, maybe. It's going to be tough. You're going to need some other guys to step up, and we'll see what they do with the rest of free agency. I mean, you got $19 million to spend. Lemieux, Buchnevich needs to be signed. Trouba still needs to be signed, of course, and D'Angelo, who will command a decent deal. So I'm not sure how much space you're really going to have. I know a lot of Rangers fans are hoping for Panarin, but once you sign who you have there, we'll see. But it's promising, obviously, and then you get into some of the prospects that they have, and then you get into the fact that they still have a first, 2 seconds, and a third. It's looking pretty good. But again, as much as I don't view the Braun trade as this disastrous trade for the Flyers, the Hayes signing as a disastrous move for the Flyers, I don't view this as a disastrous trade for the Jets. It's just the consequences of going for it and falling short. Unfortunately, they fell much shorter than they would have wanted to. The Olimata Dominic Cahoon deal, I have no idea how long this video is going to be at this point. Welcome to the podcast. The Olimata Dom Cahoon trade, and again, not to just be like, hey, look what the site says, here you go, but I genuinely, like, I feel like obviously having the chart to look at kind of represents the point. I don't get it, Pittsburgh. I don't get it. And apparently the word was out that it was down to Mata, or I think the word was Jack Johnson. And I'm going to tell you, you probably made the wrong choice. But then again, the Jack Johnson deal is more difficult to move. Obviously, if you look at the over 3 years, Mata started strong and it's dropped off. So if you're Chicago, you're certainly going to hope that you can repair Ole Mata. You look at what you did this year with Strome, where it's like, man, is he ever going to make it? And then bam. It could happen again. And it makes me wonder, heading into Friday, what we're going to be seeing from Chicago. And again, you look at the fucking year Dylan Strome had. It's unreal. But you look at, Chicago and what their strategy might be now, because I think everybody thought before this deal, Bowen Byram, you got to. Now maybe they don't, but I've talked about it. Keith, Seabrook, I think technically you'd still have Murphy, Byram, Mata, and Gustafsson. That's a pretty damn good top six. It's not bad. So for me, yeah, Pittsburgh, you get a serviceable winger for sure, for cheap too. But I mean, I don't view this as a disaster for Chicago if they can repair Ole Mata. And maybe it's just all a part of the grand plan. Maybe they do go for one of the other forwards, of course, that we have in this draft. This absolutely stocked draft at this point. Stocked and stacked, for that matter. I think that's pretty much it outside of the Connor Ingram trade, where I don't know what Tampa's doing. Unless Connor Ingram really is just an asshole, I don't understand it. A 7th round pick for a former 2nd round pick, or 3rd round pick, excuse me, who put up a 922 in the AHL this year. I will show you how good a 922 in the AHL happens to be. Spoiler alert, it's pretty goddamn good. Now, the word was apparently that Ingram has attitude issues, but I don't get it. I do not get it. Bennington, Mikhail Berdine, Chris Dreger, and, it's very few who actually did that well. You could argue Troy Grosnick was the top goaltender for playing 46 games. And, of course, some of these other guys, hell, Nick Schneider only played 11 games. Connor Ingram is looking real promising. So, for Nashville, at least be happy about that. You have that going for you. But the last thing I wanted to talk about here was the Bruins, actually. Because Don Sweeney held a press conference, and this is like the first time I'm talking about the Bruins in a video since they lost. But Don Sweeney held a press conference kind of talking about the Bruins' future, and the last Bruins vid I put out talking about their future, I actually had a whole entire video about it, talked about how there have been the rumors about maybe trading Torrey Krug and trading David Backes. The word was, with David Backes, they plan on keeping him, which, give me a second, I'm not even making a jump cut, I don't care. That is better. With David Backes, they plan on keeping him, viewing him as a 4th-line role guy. And they're still debating whether or not they should trade Torrey Krug. The TLDR on Krug, 1 year left on his deal. Do you want to pay him the money that's coming his way? Because Torrey Krug is one hell of a defenseman. Especially in terms of zone exits. Defensively, but the thing about Torrey Krug is, he's not the defensive shutdown guy on the line. You play him with a Carlo type, and you have Carlo shut people down while Krug handles the offense. And again, I've told you guys, Brandon Carlo is one of the better shutdown defensemen in the league. From an offensive standpoint or zone exits, don't rely on him, but he will shut people down. That's what you do. Shutdown guy with Carlo, Torrey, go. And that's what Torrey Krug does, and he's very fucking good at it. But they are debating, apparently, trading Torrey Krug rather than potentially re-signing him, which to me is a fucking nightmare, because I've talked about it, and I talked about it in that video. I would rather see them keep Torrey Krug and go for it in this upcoming season than trade him away now. The Bruins are still good enough to go for it. 100%. And, you know, I'll also talk about the injuries. Well, fuck it, I'll talk about the injuries now. I do feel a little bit better based on what we know about the injuries. Patrice Bergeron with a groin injury. Pasternak and Marchand both hurt with hand injuries. Marchand, I think it was more of a finger, and of course, he ended up getting hurt this past winter when he apparently fucking slipped and fell in a parking lot, and Brad Marchand had injured his wrist and then re-injured it in that pre-Stanley Cup scrimmage. It certainly explains why that top line was a shadow, you know, a shell of itself, especially Pasternak and Marchand, and there were so many moments where people are like, why the fuck aren't they shooting? It's because they were hurt. Then you have the argument of, well, would it have been better to have, you know, the Koolmans in the lineups for them instead of playing them? And that's often a conundrum. You look at Leafs fans, the second they found out that Zach Hyman had a torn ACL, they're like, and I remember Steve Dangle complaining about this. He's like, why the fuck wasn't Nick Petan in? We see that every year. Why was this guy playing when he was so hurt? The Bruins were still 60 minutes away from a cup despite those injuries, but obviously it makes me feel a little bit better as a Bruins fan. I mean, Chris Wagner, obviously with the injury, Nordstrom's roughed up from blocking shots. I'm not going to get into the whole Jake DeBrusk playing with a concussion thing. It's disgusting on the Bruins' part, and more so the league, and that's not me passing the buck to defend my team. The league needs to be sharper. They need to be harsher with this. If you give a player a chance to say, I will play, I want to play, I'm good, he's going to play. He or she, doesn't matter. They're going to play. So, from the league's perspective, it needs to be, you cannot play. But obviously, things are just a little bit cloudy when you have the NHL refusing to admit their, you know, the fucking results of playing their sport and concussions and all that shit. But yeah, obviously not happy to hear that Jake DeBrusk apparently played through a concussion. Nola Chari was obviously roughed up. Kevin Miller could have been thrown from a helicopter without a parachute and not had as many injuries as he apparently had this season. So that was fun. But, you know, to that point, I guess, because I did want to talk about that. But talking about Torrey Krug again, I'd rather see him stay than be traded. I'd rather have them re-sign him than trade him now and hurt their chance to being contenders. But not planning on trading David Backes could be the main reason why the Bruins fall short again next year. Obviously, the division's tough, and we've talked about it, between Tampa, Toronto, Montreal, Boston themselves, the Florida Panthers. I mean, fuck, just the addition of Joel Quenneville. We talked about in this video earlier what a coach can bring to a team and how Barry Trotz helped turn around the Islanders, what Greg Berube did. Coach Quenneville to Florida is huge. And if they have as big of an offseason as they can potentially have, you know, a top 3 spot might not be safe. They have $22 million. You don't really have anybody big that you need to sign. Malgin's okay. And here, you know what? Just to not talk out of my ass here, we'll look at Dennis Malgin. He's okay. They only tracked him for 11 games. And if you look at Ian McCoshen, he's not even on the list. He spent most of the season down in Springfield. So they don't have too much to worry about. You get Panarin, you get Bobrovsky. Who the hell knows what that team does next year? So for me to hear that the Bruins are planning on keeping David Backes, and again, I talked about it in that recap video. I love David Backes, but you sat a $6 million player in the Cup final. You have to get rid of him. You have to free up that space. You still have your first round pick. Use it to get rid of David Backes. You have guys like Trent Frederick, like Anders Bjork, like Lauka. I wouldn't give up Lauka or Studnicka. Yeah, I wouldn't give up Vakanainen either. But you have pieces that you can use to entice a team to take on David Backes. You managed to move the unmovable Bolesky deal. It can be done. And it should be done because the Bruins have $14 million in space, and hearing that they are planning on keeping Backes essentially means Danton Heinen, McAvoy, Carlo, and that's it. If you're a Bruins fan like I am, do not expect them to do much on July 1st because they are not going to be able to at this point in time. You're probably going to see Noel Acciari go. This absolutely confirms that Marcus Johansson is gone. I still, as I mentioned, think Carlo will get 3 to 4. McAvoy will probably get like 5 to 6 on a bridge deal. And then there's no money left. And then heading into the next offseason, what are you going to do? Because that Backes $6 million is still there. Charlie Coyle, that's better. Charlie Coyle will be up. I mean, Wagner and Nordstrom, but DeBrusk's going to have to be paid. Grzelcyk and Clifton will be up at that point. It's very disheartening to hear that not Charlie Coyle, but the David Backes, who is listed above him, is apparently going to be a Bruin next year, because it puts them into a really rough spot. Because unlike this past year, you're not going to have that cap space to go out and get a Carlo, or fucking hell, I can't talk, to get a Coyle or to get a Marcus Johansson at the deadline. You're not going to have the space. Coyle obviously making 3.2, and you had Marcus Johansson at nearly 4.6. You're not going to have that luxury to go out and get players of that caliber to stock up for a cup run. So if you are not trading David Backes, again, you're condemning yourself to just re-signing who you have, making minor moves, and relying on younger guys like Frederick, like Bjork, like Studnicka, maybe even Lauko, who's still in junior, to step up, make this team, and deliver. And I don't know how big of a fan of that strategy I am. And again, if you look at some of the free agents, it's not as if the Bruins would be in for Artemi Panarin, which would be a fucking dream and a half, but it's not as if that's going to happen, right? They probably wouldn't be in. Someone like Jason Spetz is not going to help, but they need that top 6 help. It wouldn't be Duchesne. It probably wouldn't be Panarin. Who's to fucking say with Joe Pavelski? Maybe, because we don't know what his future is in San Jose. And pretty much make no mistake, too, when you look at the Bruins roster, I mean, top line, Krejci's the second line center. You need a winger to be next to him and Jake DeBrusk. So, I mean, you look at this team, and here, we'll just look forwards. You look at this team. So, again, Joe Pavelski, who's to say? Jason Pominville, you'd rather keep Marcus Johansson. Joe Thornton wouldn't come back. Maybe they'd end up going for a Gustav Nyquist or a Mats Zuccarello, but pretty much what it is Johansson's already there. Mojo's already there. You keep together the ridiculous Coyle, Johansson, and Heinen line, still having the ability to flip Heinen and Pasternak if need be, and then who knows? I mean, again, instead of $6 million, you'd be looking at $20 million, which would be enough to re-sign Johansson, which would be enough to bring back Heinen and McAvoy and Carlo, and maybe still have that money to go after someone else to fill out that right side, where instead of, I don't even know what the fuck we're looking at here as Bruins fans, I guess it would be on the right-hand side this year, Pasternak, Heinen, and probably Kuhlman Wagner, instead of potentially looking at Pasternak, Heinen, Marcus Johansson. I mean, just, I don't know. And again, even if they didn't think Mojo was the guy, maybe you do go for Zuccarello. I don't know, man. It's extremely disheartening to hear that David Backes is staying. I like David Backes. I don't like him for $6 million. So it'll be very interesting to see. Obviously, just in general, I'm so hyped up for the draft. I don't think I'd be talking hockey for however long this video has been if I wasn't excited to see what's going to happen. Not just for my team, not just with the draft to see who goes where, but for what craziness might happen. There's still just so much going on with so many teams. Like, what's Tampa going to do this offseason? Pittsburgh's been crazy. The repercussions for Nashville going for it. The Leafs, are you going to be able to move Zaitsev? Is Marleau going back to San Jose somehow if they can afford it? And if he does, what happens with Thornton and Pavelski? Anaheim continues to be weird. Edmonton, you never fucking know with Edmonton. Montreal, are they going to be in for Matt Duchene? Again, apparently Nashville is as well. Dallas, Detroit, of course, now with Yzerman at the helm. Los Angeles doing Los Angeles things. It is a very interesting time. The hockey season has not died down yet at all. We're about 3 weeks out from that once we get to the really the middle stages of July after free agency. Super excited though for the draft. If you have made it all the way through this, I thank you very goddamn much. Let me know down in the comments below, as I'm sure you would have already done, your thoughts on everything that we talked about in this little, I'm calling it a freaking mini podcast at this point. I will see you guys soon. Again, I will be live streaming on Twitch during the draft. Again, if you don't know, I stream on Twitch nightly. I don't always put up alerts on YouTube because, again, I did that last year, and my channel got deactivated for 8 hours because they viewed it as spam videos. But follow me on Twitter or on Discord. All those links are in the description, but I stream every night on Twitch, normally around 11 p.m. Eastern. Later streams because, again, I'm practically nocturnal. So, yeah, god damn it, guys. Thank you. I love you all, and I will see you after the draft. Hopefully we have some more interesting stuff to talk about.